If you are under 40, stop ignoring this before it's too late. I used to believe time was generous, not kind, not forgiving, just endlessly available, like a wide road that stayed open no matter how slowly you walked, like something patient waiting behind your plans. When you're young, time doesn't feel like a resource. It feels like air, always there, uncounted, invisible. No one decides to waste it. No one plans to drift. It begins quietly. You tell yourself there's no rush, that this isn't the season yet, that you'll be ready later. Later sounds responsible. Later feels safe, until later becomes a habit. And habits are dangerous when they don't feel wrong. If this reflection resonates, consider subscribing for more calm, honest conversations about things most people realize too late. What no one really tells you early on is that youth doesn't feel rare while you're living inside it. It doesn't feel fragile. It doesn't feel urgent. It doesn't come with a warning attached. It feels ordinary. It feels like the default setting of life, something solid, something you can always return to if you take a wrong turn. Youth carries the feeling of permanence, as if the energy you wake up with renews itself without asking anything in return, as if strength is a setting that stays switched on once it's been activated. You assume relationships pause exactly where you leave them, that people wait. That distance only changes timing, not tone. You believe unfinished things remain unfinished, not expired. That what you don't choose now will still be there later, unchanged, when you finally decide to reach for it. The world quietly reinforces this belief every day. Everything around you signals abundance, more options, more opportunities, more time than you could ever realistically use. Nothing feels scarce, nothing feels fragile. When everyone around you is moving at the same pace, waiting feels reasonable, responsible even. There's comfort in shared delay. If no one else seems rushed, why should you be? Looking back now, I can see how deeply this belief is woven into modern life. We've become skilled at postponing discomfort. We smooth over tension before it requires honesty. We delay conversations that might change the direction of things. We defer decisions that would ask us to give something up, not because we lack effort, not because we're careless, because we're trained to avoid friction. We're taught that discomfort means something is wrong, instead of understanding it as the cost of alignment. There is always a reason to wait. Always something unresolved enough to justify staying still, just a little longer. At the time, I believed patience was wisdom. I believed restraint was maturity. I told myself I was being thoughtful, careful, responsible. But I wasn't choosing carefully. I was choosing comfort. And comfort is persuasive. It speaks softly. It reassures rather than challenges. It never asks for proof. Comfort doesn't warn you. It agrees with you. It feels safe until you slowly realize it has been making decisions on your behalf, quietly shaping a life built more around ease than intention. By the time this becomes clear, the clock has been moving the entire time. The second hand never paused, never hesitated. Even when everything around you felt still, time was already carrying you forward, whether you were ready or not. There is a promise that moves quietly through youth. It isn't announced. It isn't explained. No one ever asks you to agree to it. You simply absorb it over time. The sense that time bends in your favor, that deadlines are flexible suggestions, not fixed lines, that life will adjust itself to your intentions when the moment feels right. You begin to believe nothing needs to be final yet, that you're allowed to live in drafts, that every decision can be revised later. There's room to test paths without committing to them, room to hesitate without consequence, room to step away and return when you feel more certain, more prepared. You assume that whatever you delay can be recovered and maybe even improved once you're ready to give it your full attention. And when nothing collapses right away, the belief settles deeper. You postpone something important, and the day still ends. The world doesn't respond. No signal appears telling you that you crossed a line. You wake up the next morning intact. So the delay feels harmless, measured, even wise. What I didn't understand then is that most losses don't arrive in a single moment. They don't announce themselves. They don't demand attention or leave a clear marker behind. They fade. They thin out at the edges first. They lose warmth without becoming cold all at once. Things become harder to reach, then harder to recognize. And by the time you notice, you can't remember when they started slipping away. The body never warns you about the last year it works effortlessly. Relationships don't announce the final season when repair comes easily. Purpose doesn't knock when it decides to stop waiting for readiness. It simply moves on, quietly. I spent years climbing toward goals that looked correct on paper. They earned approval. They answered questions before they were asked. From a distance, they resembled progress. I told myself the deeper parts of life would follow naturally, that once stability was handled, meaning would settle in beside it, but meaning doesn't live in leftovers. At the time, I couldn't see the trade I was making. Every delay softened my awareness. Every compromise dulled the signal just a little more. I could still sense discomfort, but I learned how to lower its volume and call it patience. You can train yourself to live slightly misaligned. Most people do. It doesn't hurt enough to stop. Not at first. The misalignment feels manageable, almost normal. By the time the discomfort becomes clear, living this way feels familiar. And correcting it asks for more honesty, more courage, more effort than you ever planned to give, all because you trusted the quiet promise that there would always be time to return to what mattered most. If this feels uncomfortably familiar, stay with it. Leave a comment or subscribe if you want more conversations like this. The warnings were never loud. They didn't interrupt my days or demand explanations. They didn't arrive with urgency or force me to stop what I was doing. They arrived quietly, in ways that were easy to dismiss, easy to rationalize, easy to postpone. A heaviness in the morning that no amount of rest seemed to solve, a kind of tiredness that sleep touched but never fully reached. Conversations that still took place, still sounded normal, yet felt thinner, as if something essential had been removed without anyone saying when. There were moments of silence where a thought tried to surface, not sharply, not urgently, just enough to be noticed. And every time it appeared, I reached for noise instead. Something to fill the space, something to keep the surface moving. Nothing dramatic followed, no collapse, no obvious failure, no moment I could later point to and say, "That's when it changed. That's the problem." We're taught to expect turning points to announce themselves, with events, with visible consequences that demand attention. We're conditioned to believe change only matters when something breaks. But the most important warnings don't arrive like alarms. They sound like fatigue that doesn't have a clear cause, like restlessness that lingers no matter what you adjust, like a quiet sense that something important has been postponed without ever being rescheduled. I ignored those signs because ignoring them didn't cost me right away. It made the next day easier, and the one after that. Avoidance is efficient. It reduces friction in the moment. It smooths the day. It keeps things moving. Only later did I understand what I was truly delaying. It wasn't action, it wasn't effort, it was honesty. Honesty with a body asking for care while I kept negotiating with it. Honesty in relationships that needed presence, not patience. Honesty with myself about what I no longer wanted to confront. There is a moment, different for everyone, when you finally slow down enough to notice something unsettling. The room hasn't changed, the routines are familiar, the surroundings look exactly as they always have, but you don't. Your energy doesn't return the way it once did. Your patience thins faster than you expect. Recovery takes longer, emotionally, physically, mentally, and the things you believed were flexible begin to feel firm, not closed, but no longer waiting. That's when the realization arrives, not as panic, not as urgency, as clarity, quiet, undeniable, a calm, devastating clarity that tells you something important shifted while you weren't paying attention, and it didn't need permission to do so. You understand then that time was never generous, it was exact. It didn't hurry you, it didn't raise its voice. It never issued threats or warnings you could point to. It simply answered. It returned, with quiet consistency, whatever you practiced day after day, whatever you repeated without much examination. If you practiced delay, it returned distance. If you practiced avoidance, it shaped absence. If you practiced comfort, it built inertia. So gradually you mistook it for stability. This is the part people resist, because it asks you to accept something uncomfortable. Nothing was taken from you. Nothing slipped away while you weren't paying attention. You didn't lose your life to bad luck or unfair timing or circumstances that singled you out. You arrived here through ordinary decisions made repeatedly that felt reasonable in the moment, and that's what makes it difficult to face. The world I grew up in didn't pretend time was limitless. Limits were visible. Stages felt more defined. People planned earlier, committed earlier, accepted trade-offs earlier. Not because they were wiser or braver, but because the illusion hadn't been perfected yet. Today, postponement is encouraged at every turn. There's always another version coming, another update, another reset promised just ahead. You're told you can revisit everything later, your health, your relationships, your direction, as if life itself is standing still, waiting for your signal. But windows don't announce themselves. They don't slam shut or make a sound. They narrow. So slowly, it feels like nothing is happening. So gradually that shrinking options feel like patience. Over time, the question shifts. It stops being, what could I do if I wanted to? And becomes, what am I still willing to pay for? That change doesn't feel energizing. It feels sobering. The mindset doesn't shift when fear finally arrives. It shifts when negotiation ends. When you realize certain costs no longer accept delay as currency. The body asks for care now, not intentions set aside. People ask for presence now, not explanations later. The work that matters asks for movement, not careful planning. This is where many people stop again, because starting now feels heavier than waiting ever did. Waiting felt light, comfortable, forgiving. Beginning feels expensive. The difference is subtle, but final. Earlier, discomfort was optional. You could postpone it and feel no immediate loss. Later, discomfort becomes the price of entry. And the longer you waited, the higher that price rose quietly, until one day you realized you weren't being asked to pay more. You were simply being shown what delay had already cost you. I won't tell you everything collapses if you wait. That wouldn't be honest. Most things don't fall apart all at once. They keep functioning. Bills get paid. Schedules stay full. People still know your name. From the outside, life can look steady, responsible, even successful, but something inside begins to thin. Depth fades long before structure does. Meaning drains quietly, while appearances stay intact. You can move through years in a life that works, yet feels oddly hollow when the noise finally settles. That's the regret that lingers. Not failure, not loss. It's the quiet recognition that you traded something irreplaceable for something temporary. time exchanged for comfort, honesty postponed for ease, presence delayed until conditions felt better, all while believing you could reverse the trade later. You can't. The danger is that no one feels this early. Early on, you feel capable. You feel healthy enough. You feel buffered from consequence. You tell yourself you aren't avoiding anything, just prioritizing, that now isn't the right moment, that the door isn't closing, only waiting. So you defer. Conversations that matter get softened. Decisions that ask courage get postponed. Signals from your body and your mind get negotiated with, and nothing punishes you right away. That's why the pattern forms. Avoidance works in the short term. It smooths the day. It keeps things comfortable, until one day later stops feeling optional. It no longer sounds flexible. It hardens. It becomes a condition you live inside. By then, beginning costs more than it once did. The energy required is higher. The margin for mistakes is narrower. The space to recover is thinner than you remember. Things that once felt light now demand weight. What could have been adjusted gently now resists change. I'm not saying this to push you forward. Push. This isn't urgency meant to motivate. It's accuracy. Time doesn't listen to intention. It doesn't respond to what you plan to do someday. It responds to what you practice day after day, quietly, consistently, and it is patient. Too patient. Patient enough to let you believe you still have room, enough time, enough flexibility, right up until the moment you notice the road ahead has narrowed, and you realize you didn't just arrive here. You've been walking this direction for years. There's a moment that comes quietly, not as fear, not as panic, just a pause where a thought settles heavier than the rest. Something you've been telling yourself can wait. Not forever, just long enough. Long enough to feel more ready. Long enough to feel steadier. Long enough to believe the timing will improve on its own. But time doesn't store intentions. It doesn't remember promises made in passing. It doesn't keep space open out of kindness. It moves, even when you don't. And one day, readiness finally arrives. Calm, reasonable, late. By then, the body is less forgiving. The distance is wider. The door doesn't open the way it once did. Not because you failed, because the window closed while you were waiting to feel sure. That's the part people don't talk about. You don't lose your chance all at once. You misplace it slowly, telling yourself you'll come back for it. Time doesn't come back to check. It doesn't ask if you're prepared now. It doesn't renegotiate. It only leaves behind what you practiced. If these reflections resonate, stay here. Subscribe if you want more quiet, honest conversations like this, not to motivate you, but to help you see clearly while there's still room to choose. Because the most dangerous lie isn't that you won't change. It's believing you can always change later. And later has a way of arriving already spent.